guess, like, how can I expect how many of you are from programming background or computer science? Can anyone help me with that? Okay, I see one, four. All right. So if I have not forgotten everything that I remember, initials and four means you are from computer science department. So I see good amount of, yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Vanshika. So source is your file from where you compile your programs. You take your source, you build into a binary or uh, something that runs and something that gives you a thing. And open source means something that's available up to a place where someone can access it. It doesn't need to be on internet necessarily. It doesn't need to be somewhere, but a place where if someone tries, they can go ahead and access it. Now, it's a method. It's a development method of how you develop your software, how you write things in open source. You try to put somewhere in clouds that different people can collaborate and come together. But it's much more than that. It's a movement. There is ideology behind open source which says if you are using some piece of software, there must be certain amount of freedom that attaches to it, and anyone who is using it, they should be free enough to do what they want. That's the open source movement is all about. It doesn't have anything to do exactly with software. We, you, all of us around computer science backgrounds, we just happen to ship software. So I'm going to talk about free and open source software. But open source is not exactly necessarily restricted to software. Now, before moving ahead, let's just see what we are going to discuss. What is open source? I will touch on it a bit. Then free and open source software and what goes beyond it, how to contribute to FOSS projects, and one of the project that I'm very big part of. I mean, it's a very big part of me, and I have been contributing. I have been a part of it for a very long time. The Fedora project. I'll discuss that for a little bit. So, what makes me eligible to be here and talk to you? I just wanted to make sure that you are aware. I am software engineer at Red Hat, and my main job revolves around developing and administering infrastructure for Fedora and CentOS. Even if you go narrow down, Fedora and CentOS CI infrastructure. I'm also part of community. Fedora Mindshare is a leadership committee, and we take care of happiness of community, what goes around, what kind of words we are putting out, how Fedora is taking care of different individuals in the community. And in the last, uh, I run a distribution dev room in one of my favorite conferences of all time, FOSDEM. Now coming back to FOSS, free and open source software. Free, usually I do this face to face, so I have much more interaction, and I know looking at you what your expectations are of free, but here I'm just gonna say it out loud. Well, so when we say free, we expect its term in the monetary sense, but not in free and open source software. Free as in terms of freedom of speech, not as in free beer or free pizza or free something. Which means that a free and open source software it's very much possible that it might be paid. You may have to pay to use it, but it goes behind the philosophy of free. We'll touch on that later. And as I said, open source, that means this is accessible to people. If you are using a piece of software, you should be able to access it, you should be able to see what's going under the hood of it. A couple of years ago, I read this quote. I guess it was one of the in Red Hat handbooks. If you buy a car and you can't open the hood of it and you can't see what's inside it, even though you are not mechanical engineer, you don't know anything how the engines work, but having the ability to open the hood and see what's running inside it gives you the right that you paid for it, and you should be able to do what you want. Very old, naive, because I'm not sure expertise level of or understanding of open source software for everyone. I'm going to give you one example that I often use. Uh, it's called, okay, so if you go to a bakery, you buy a cake, and if the bakery starts saying that you cannot take this cake home, you have to eat it in here, you ask, okay, what are the things in it? They say, no, you are not allowed to know how this cake is made. You have no clue, and you can only eat it in this certain area that I'm assigning you. Also, you can't share this cake with your friends. If they want, they'll have to buy a new one. Now, these are the restrictions that comes with most of the time that comes with proprietary software. So when we talk FOSS, the opposite will be proprietary. But then again, there's a cake shop which is giving you all the ingredients, proper instructions of how to make it in your own house. You can take it, you can, in fact, it encourages you to share the same thing with your friends. And most of the time, again, as I said, free is not in terms of free beer, free pizzas or something, but most of the time it also happened to be free of cost. Now there are certain advantages that comes with this: your freedom to use the software, freedom to redistribute. This is free and open source software. If someone is not sure what exactly it means, we all some of the places you would also see it's called FLOSS, free libre open source software. Libre is just as liberty, so that you are not confused with free as in the money part. Now, what? Okay, we know what now FOSS is, but where is it used? Everything we have, all of us are surrounded by some part of free and open source software. If you're using your phone, Android is based on open source kernel, Linux, Wikipedia, governments, United States governments, even our Indian governments, we use a lots and lots of open source technologies behind it. Giants like Facebook and Twitter, they use a lot of open source technology behind it. Without it, it won't be possible to make it on this scale as of now. And they also do a lot of free and open source technologies. They have made a lot of things that is accessible by people. Raspberry Pi is one example of more than free and open source software. It's called free and open source hardware. How to make it, how this thing is built, how you can use it, how you can hack on it, all these things are publicly documented, and you can go and see how this thing comes together. Nextcloud is a very big cloud platform where you can run your hosted things, open source. Most of you would be using VLC media player to run videos, music, and same goes for Firefox, right? I'm using it as my browser. And definitely Linux. If you know anything around open source, then you are aware of Linux. Open source, as I said, is everywhere. On the web, in 2014, Secure One did this survey where they analyzed that almost 80% of the servers, publicly accessible server, are running Linux or Unix like operating system. And 20.7% includes everything else. And it's not just the serverware operating system, but also the things that websites are built on. Call it Apache, Flask, Node. Again, if you are around development, you must have heard of Apache server, where you run your websites, and then Flask, how you develop with Python, Node.js, Ruby on Rails. All these things are open source. So it's very easy to say that internet is very much possible as of now because of Linux operating system and because of other open source softwares that is empowering them. In your code, open source, if you're using Python, if you're using Go, all the major generic programming languages are open source because there are certain benefits that come with it. And it's not just that generic programming language that is platform independent, but also the platform independent ones like Swift or Microsoft .NET. Swift is for Apple products. You make your iPhone applications using Swift, and Microsoft .NET is used to develop Windows native uh, applications. And these are open source as well. But why public code? You are working on a code. Why would you want to make it public? Because there are certain benefits that come with it. And the first thing is control. When you are using something, you are in control to see what's going behind the curtains, what's going in the code, and if you want to use that or not. You are controlling everything that's going inside it. You are able to see each and every changes that's made with every release. Unlike if you are using one application that's not free and open source software, you just see an update and something happened. We don't know what's going behind it. We don't know if it is going to bring a major bug. If it has some licenses that you don't want to use that may have problems with your privacy. You are in control when you're using free and open source software. Again, you don't need to know all these things, but having the ability, having the authority to go ahead and see it, that's what matters. So they said, opening the hood of a car and seeing the engine there and what's going inside it, having the right to open it and do some things with it because you paid for it, is what matters. You don't have to be an engineer and do these things. It's about the control. It's about your power. I can't exactly remember who said it, but power to open source is power to people. One other thing other than control is training. If something is open source, you would find tons of documentation around it. You will find forums where you can go and you can ask questions. You can share your solutions. Okay, I'm doing this thing, but I'm expecting efficiency of X, but I'm getting Y. What might be the difference? And people will be able to help you because they have been working on it and they are using the same platform and they are open to share about this. So, and also you can make training materials on it. It's very easy to access them because it's open source and people know that it should be easily accessible. So training part comes as well. It's very easy to be efficient in something that's open source compared to a proprietary where you don't have access to all the documentation and material and code because you can analyze it much deeper. And then security. Uh, Imagine a scenario where a software is being used by a billion people in the world, and all of a sudden a very big bug came that anyone can access your phone or laptop with just one command. Now if it is a proprietary software, most probably it will that particular module or that part of software will be built by a team, 4, 5, 6 people at max. Depending on 4 to 5 to 6 or even 20 people to fix a bug that's super critical is always a bottleneck. Instead, if you have hundreds and thousands of community people, like if you know how to fix that bug, you can go ahead and submit a pull request or submit the patch. I won't go into Git terminology yet. You can submit a patch to the code and it will be fixed. You don't need to wait on someone else. If you developed a code and next day you are not interested in it anymore, but it's heavily used, others can help maintain it, and it will also solve a lot of security problems that come along with it. Stability, as I said, if anyone is free to use, and like Linux is very stable on multiple platforms. You may not see Linux as super stable if you just look at one, but you look at how many different platforms and how many different architectures it runs on compared to something like macOS. If you try to run macOS on any other device than Apple, then it won't. It will break and there'll be huge amount of problems compared to any other operating system you would see. The reason for it is that different people have tried it, tested it, and submitted fixes, opened a bug request which developers can see and fix it. So stability comes along with that. And Linus Torvald is the person who developed Linux. I'll cover on him and his work a bit after that. But he said, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. It's again touching on the security point that if so many people are looking at something, it's very good chance that you'll be able to catch minor mistakes and bugs, which might result in a big problem afterwards. I don't want to make it boring history lesson, but just giving you a very brief timeline, right? Before 1983, the way softwares were built was open by default kind of thing. There was no thing as, oh, I have to protect my software because it was not considered a property, property. In 1983, before I'll say just at the starting of 80s, companies started to realize that no, software is my actually very big benefit part of property, and I must defend it. And then they started to put copyrights on it. They started to include license that you can't use it without paying. And Richard Stallman noticed this since he had been using the software as open to all. They should be able to access, they should be able to share things. Before 1980s, hardware was the major thing that companies were betting on. Their target was to ship as many hardware. That's how the money was made. But as we know, as the hardware got powerful, the software came in that were able to do interesting things, and compared to others it was much more better. And all of a sudden they realized that okay, we can make a lot of money using software, and that's when they started protecting it, and that's when they started making it closed. Richard Stallman didn't like it because he had been using the practice of open source for a long time. By the way, there was no term open source at that time. So he introduced GNU project, which was he say, okay, there are like windows. You can't share it, you can't redistribute it, you can't do anything with it. So what will I do? I'll make an operating system which is free to share, which is free to do everything, just the way we had been following back in time, right? GNU project is called GNU, not Unix. It's a reverse acronym. Ignore that. But it's just it's a way of saying that okay, it's not exactly that similar concept, but open. In 1985, it was also Free Software Foundation was also made in part with the GNU Foundation plus more. Free Software Foundation provided a support for such projects that wanted to be free at that time, free and open source. I hope what you understand by now that free doesn't exactly mean no money part, but freedom of speech, liberty. So, Free Software Foundation uh, is a foundation that started supporting such softwares. And in 1989, the first copyleft license was brought. So, to give you a little bit of context, what copyleft license is, there are two kind of licenses. One is permissive, and one is copyleft. I'm not talking about copyright side of things, by the way. So permissive is, you must have heard of MIT licenses, or maybe not. Might not have heard, but these are licenses that says, okay, here's the thing, you can use it, you can give credit to me, but if something breaks, don't sue me. I'm just making this on my own time. Things around it. GNU Public License (GPL) was launched in 1989, and it's changed a lot of things. Now it was becoming a norm, and it was being aware that okay, there's something called GPL. That means people are actually working on open source projects. Again, it was not called open source, but the idea behind it, right? People were working on such free and open source software that has license attached to it. That means anyone who is using it they'll give you credit. They might make their projects open source as well, and they're not going to come haunt you. If I make a project and you are using it, you may come back and blame me that I was using Vipul's project which broke my laptop. GPL and other licenses that followed after this prevented that. Now this was in 80s. Coming back to 90s, in 1991, Linux kernel, that is by Linus Torvald, he released in a mailing list. He said, "Okay, so I'm working on this thing called Linux." Prakash, if you can, please, can you share the link of the email that Linus Torvald shared? So all these things are publicly accessible information. He made the first Linux kernel, which was following GNU's ideology, which is keeping things free, keeping things open. It's my for my personal use. If you use it, you on you. But hey, this is something I find interesting. But if we could go back in history and we ask when was the time everything changed for open source software, it was 1997. Since GNU license came and since Linux kernel came, it's been going very strong. But people started to take it seriously, and the turning point, if we try to, okay, which part was the turning point when free and open source software where it started to go up, was 1997 when the book The Cathedral and the Bazaar released. It spoke about two different methodologies of developing software. One was The Cathedral, which was very locked down, which was very limited to certain individuals, and the other one was Bazaar, where anyone could go and anyone could explore what they are doing. It spoke a great deal on ideas behind open source and what it means. And then in 1998, Open Source Initiative was found, and that's when the term open source was coined, which means all the things that I have discussed. The software, the source is somewhere open, and the freedom behind it, and things around it. To call, in my opinion, there are different people who will say different things about it, but in my opinion, to have a free and open source software, you need to be able to do four things. You don't need to read huge documentation to understand, just remember the 4 R's of it. You should be able to read the code. You should be able to run it on your software on your device, I mean. You should be able to revise it, as in if you want to make some changes to it, you don't like the way it's working, you don't like the way it's performing, you don't like the way it looks, you should be able to take certain parts of the code and you should be able to modify it to suit your need, and you should be able to redistribute it. There should be no restrictions that okay, if you use this, you should not be able to forward it to your friend. If you buy a Windows CD, you see it says licensed for some, I don't exactly remember, but it says do not share it. Wherein if you see where you download, let's say Fedora operating system or Ubuntu, most of the time it will say share it with your friend. Redistribution is a great part of it. And to me, free and open source software means the 4 R's. You should be able to read it, run it, modify it or revise it, and redistribute it. Now, anyone has any doubt on what open source and FOSS means, Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. I would like to discuss this more than just being a talk. I'm looking at my screens and I'm just saying. So, anyone? No one? Let me just see chat. What's going on there? Oh, thank you, Prakash. Okay, so contributing to open source. We call it contribution because again, everything is open. It's based around community, and you take out some of your time to make that software better for others or for your own purpose. Before you start contributing, the first thing is to find a project that interests you. Don't look at the project, oh, my friend is doing it. If I go to that project, I may get a very higher chance of easily being pulled into it and I'll have a lot of benefit. Don't do that. When you find a project that interests you, interest motivates you to do better. And that will result in making it successful. Just a second. Anyone can take an open source project on GitHub and build a software that is proprietary in nature. Isn't that a huge limitation? So if the software is proprietary, then it becomes limitation, not to the open source project. And if you are concerned about your project that someone will take it and build a proprietary things around it, you can always attach licenses to it. There are licenses that says if you are using this piece of software or this piece of code, you have to make your code open as well. And keeping your code open does not mean you can't do business around it. Look at Red Hat. It has more than $3-4 billion of revenues per year. It was recently IBM acquired it for 34 billion dollars, the biggest software acquisition ever, software company acquisition ever. It doesn't mean you can't do business around it. Just that the code you are using is open source. You can still have subscription. Spotify, let's say. I'm giving an example. I'm not sure. I don't think Spotify's main features are open source. But even if Spotify code is open source, the content that you are consuming is paid. It's a subscription based model. The application that I'm using, this a language learning app called Busu, it's open source or it's not, doesn't matter. I am paying its subscription yearly or monthly to enjoy it. So keeping the code open does not mean that it has to be free or someone else can take a benefit. That's where the licenses comes in. Yes, Prakash, feel free.
Yeah, one more thing that I wanted to point out, going on down the same question, that anybody can use your code and make something proprietary. So it doesn't generally work that way in the industry. So generally, what happens is, yes, you can take anybody's code and you can make a proprietary solution out of it. Like a lot of companies today do that, right? Just like Facebook and Google, all of them consume open source at some level. But as a company, it's so when you write a project, the job is only 10% done, right? You would want to use that project, and if there are any bugs in that project, you would want them fixed over time, right? So a lot of time, what happens is, like for example, Google or Red Hat or anyone, if they go ahead and use a project, they also contribute back to the project, because if I'm using a certain component in a mission critical system at my company, then I would want that project to be maintained for a while so that I can continue using it. So they also end up investing back into the community to keep it alive, so that they can continue using that project. So yeah, that's how it generally works in the industry.
Yes, and it doesn't exactly mean that if someone else can take that part of code and run it is bad. That's how Linux became so huge, because people were able to take it and develop more and more on it. That's how these things work, because there are thousands and thousands of people working on that piece of code. That's what makes it better. If you go back to the benefits part of it, or Linus's code where he says that if there are too many eyes on a project, that means there are different people who are able to work on it. Uh, I'll come back to I'll come back to some of the things, how Fedora or Red Hat, how they play with these things.
Can I just add to that? So
Ananya, so here's the thing. You can't take the software that's proprietary because you don't have access to the software. You just have access to the binary, that .exe or .rpm or dot something. You just click it and it runs. There is no way for you. There are certain ways that you can reverse engineer, but even they are never perfect. So you can't see the source, so you can't run the proprietary software. That's where the problem is. But if it was open source, you would be able to take the source and compile it. If you wrote a program that does all kind of mathematical function, if I just give you the running part of it where you can put numbers and it will does calculation to you, you can't expect how the code in background looks like. But if I give you the source, you can easily get to the running part of it. So that's the
Uh,
proprietary, is that the code is locked.
can I also add to that question? Uh, Vipul, are you around?
Sorry.
Yeah, so I think what she meant was, if why would I open source my program, or why would I open source my software? What if someone just changes a few bits and uses it for their own needs? And I would like to say that that is the reason why we open source software. So
Hmm.
to a lot of us who are passionate about computer science and programming, right? Programming is like an art form, and we use it as a way to express ourselves, right? So that is the very reason why I would open source my project. It's because I wrote something good. It is decent. I would like to give it out to the world, that someone else like me might find it beneficial, right? And if someone else like me has sees something that can be improved in the project, that's how Linux grew from a student's hobby project to something that runs on top 500 of the fastest supercomputers today. Even SpaceX recent rocket launch was powered entirely by Linux, right? So that's how open source projects grow, right? You open source your project so that first of all, you express yourself in code. Second, you would like people to use your software. You should be proudly able to say that 100 other people. That's how GitHub stars and all of those work, right? You can proudly say that my software is being used at multiple places, not just by people but by industries. And then it adds a lot of weightage to your resume. The more popular your open source project is, you could just put it on your resume saying that, look, this is an open source project I wrote, and this is being used by these many people. That gives you much credibility than telling people that I did this project back then. You can't see it anywhere. I'm just telling you that I did it, right? So
So
you
Ananya's
know.
also brings a very good point. If I have an open source software which is not very permissive license, is restricted, like let's say copyleft license, where if you use this software, you must make your code open source as well. If you take and use it, and if you end up forming a big business or enterprise around it, do you want to take a risk of breaking a license? Because licenses are very difficult to deal with. If you realize that Facebook broke a very huge license of GPL, it will be very bad for them. Uh, so as I said, there is always way to reverse engineer the code. You can see. I was telling you that you can always reverse engineer and you can see how that code is built, but it's not, always not very easy. If someone finds it, if someone is interested, or if your employee leaves the company, or if they tell that okay, we are breaking a license, this is a major problem. So it's not about who will find the so Ananya mentioned, I'll just read it for the wider audience. If I build proprietary software from open source software, who will check my license, or why should I let someone access my code? You may not, but you'll have, like, there will be different people working on a project. You can never make a good successful project alone. I can definitely take a GPL or GPL2 or GPL3 license which says that I must make my code open source as well. I can use it, I can keep it in my laptop, but it's not serving any purpose. If I'm planning to redistribute it, that's where these things come in picture, that if you're planning to redistribute it, you should make the code open as well so that everyone can see it and everyone can add on top of it. And as Prakash mentioned, that's how the projects grow. So again, coming back to the point, if you are planning to contribute to an open source project, find a project that interests you. Don't just jump because your friend is doing the same thing. And the best way I find it, I package a bunch of packages in Fedora. I'll come to what packaging is later. And the packages I maintain are the ones that I use because that's what I like to work on. Look at your computer, look at your phone, see the projects you are in, see the things that you love. If you find one application, let's say LibreOffice, you love it, it's great. You see if it is open source or not. If it is open source, then you find, okay, this is the project now that I'm interested in because I like what they're doing and I would like to help them grow. So that's a very good way of finding a project. But it's not enough just to just to find a good project. It's always important to align personal experiences with your interest. If I work a lot around infrastructure and CI systems, but I don't have a lot of background around game development. If I really like a game, doesn't mean I can go and even if it's open source, I can go and start developing the super high game intensive algorithms. I'm not experienced with that. I'll try to find in that project what interests me. So there are a couple of myths that always come with open source contribution that you have to be an expert. No, you just need to be good enough that with some time you should be able to absorb what's going on there. You should be able to give some time and understand. That's all. You don't need to be good in it. You learn on the job as you do it. If you are good in Python and if your favorite project that you are using in your laptop happens to use Python, you can go and explore the code in weeks or months and then start contributing to it. But it doesn't even have to be code. You see that, okay, I'm using this tool. It would be really nice if this section of how to do this part was in their documentation. You can go ahead and make the change and request them to add it. And then yes, I'm coming to the design part. So as I said, documentation, right, is very important. You won't use a software that's not well documented because you can't figure out how it's happening. Documentation is very important part of it. Exactly. Ananya, you can feel free to unmute yourself and talk. That's totally all right. Actually, I would love that to have a proper discussion. uh, I'll read it once I'm done with this slide, or we can get back to it in the open floor at the end of the slide. Not at all, I'm not trying to run away from it. I'm really interested in discussing this. So again, you find a project that you are interested in, then you see what are the things they are using and what skills you have. One of the biggest and most important part of any project for me is the design. If it's so, design is not just, again, don't just expect UX, which is very important part as well. I'm talking user interaction, how things are made, how things can be easy. We often say that this does not look good, that's why I don't use it. You have the chance to go and fix it. You have the chance to go and help with making it better. So there's design opportunities, there's documentation opportunity. Even if none of them, you can always do more, and we'll come back to those part moving ahead. But it's just not code. Find what interests you project wise, and then find what your experience is, and find the delta, try to cover it and work with that. Before jumping in, again, you found a very good project that you love and you know exactly how you're going to help them. But one of the things that's very important to me is the community aspect of it. Before jumping in the project, look at the project and see how are they with people. Are they just bunch of jerks randomly abusing people who are trying to help them, or they are not ready to accept the help, or they are not being friendly with people, or they are diverse, they are inclusive, they want to help you. It's very easy to start with. Every project has a different way of there's this term called onboarding process, which is they help you getting started with the project, and every project has a different way of getting started with. Find the onboarding methods of that project, see how much community interaction is it. One of the things that I like to do is to go and look at the public. So if they have public mailing list, you can go back in time and you can see all the mailing list discussions that has happened. I would like to see where are the forums of it, where are the open discussion places, like are there any channels on IRC, or some people are also using telegrams now or Slack. You go to it and you see how are people, how helpful they are, how easy it is to get into it, and how are they getting help from senior expert people in the project. That's very important aspect to me. Community, diversity, inclusion, and how friendly the people are. There are certain benefits. Again, I'm no Why would you do that? Why would you want to work on others project? You are very happy in BCA, you are doing your project, you are doing your classes, and you are doing, or BCE, what is this, CME, CMS, amazing courses. Why do you need to go out of your way, out of your comfort zone, and invest your time in someone else's project? Well, if you read the slide, the very first thing is that you get to utilize what you have learned to something that actually people are using. I remember in my first year, I guess it was Prakash, and we were doing this library management or hospital management or something like this together. Well, what happened to that? Nothing. But if instead of that, I'm not saying that's bad, that's definitely very important, but there are things that thousands of people are using, and there's a much more advanced version of it. And when you go into that, you realize that the difference between what you think that you know and what's needed to know is huge. And you get to fill that gap when you work on a real world project. You gain experiences, you build your skills, and you can always say, hey, look, I worked on that. One example, if you I won't give my example, I don't want to confuse you with certain parts of the project, but if you go on a website and there's this chatbot and you helped write that, you can always say, I helped write the super famous website chatbot. You can always include it in your resume, your CVs, and you can say it to your friends. And that also serves as your proof that you know what you are talking about. You have worked on a real world project. Second is networking. It's one of my favorite thing. Uh, I have met so many great people that I love to death. They are just amazing folks around the world that have been amazing to me. They have helped me a lot, and I have grown a lot after meeting them, because you see different aspects of different cultures, the way they talk, the way they are. What is good in here might not be same in Europe, and you meet amazing people, and you realize that these are. So I know so many people who have Wikipedia pages, and then you realize that these are amazing people who are ready to come down to your level and explain something. Networking is a very big part of it. Leadership opportunities. If you are in a project and you see that, okay, something needs to be done, you can step away and say that, okay, I'm ready to take this opportunity, and I'm ready to do this thing. One of the example is people who are doing Labyrinth stuff. They are doing great, right? They are doing some initiative. They came out and they realized that, okay, if I do this, it will help bunch of people and not just me. That's one of the opportunities. When you do it in open source projects, it becomes a global thing, because you are doing it for the whole project that's being used by a very wide number of people. Uh, I'm in Fedora Mindshare, which means that I also take care of some of the community aspect around Fedora. I have taken some leadership things where I look after all mentored project, be it GSOC, be it Outreachy, be it GCI, or be it Girls Code Ruby. There are different things that you can come ahead and lead if you are passionate about it. And it gives you the opportunity to do that. And your perspective matters. We very much need voice of, like Ananya is asking, there are some doubts that we'll never be able to reach to students or certain people's understanding if we never address that. Having your voice in a larger audience is very important, and you can say that, hey, I don't like this, or I think there is a way to do it better, and every perspective matters. And that's what open source communities are about. And the last one that I'm very fortunate is friendship and travel opportunities. As I said, I know people from around the globe, and they are amazing. I have got several opportunities to go to international conferences, speak about my what I'm working on, speak about my experiences, organize multiple things, conferences and meetups around the world. It's a part of it. Obviously, you don't do it for this reason, but it definitely comes with the time as you go ahead. You build you, and again, now you have your skills, you know, amazing people, networking, you have all the things needed that big companies look for when they hire something. And just touching a little bit of career with open source, that's how these things help. You have taken initiatives in what you are doing. You have real life, real world project skills and experiences. You have presented your work, you're confident enough to go ahead and do things, and that's what makes you successful and good enough for a company to hire you. Now, coming back to the project that I am a part of, Fedora project. Yes, right. Let me read it. Okay, so Ananya, feel free to speak up. If I didn't get you, you get your points once again. Your question is, who is going to check my license if I happen to take it from someone? And yeah, Prakash, I'll just touch on it for a little bit and then we'll jump on Fedora. But you are right. We should have this discussion in the end. Anyone who is using it, they might do it. It's about the risk. If it's like question, if I don't pay my taxes, who is gonna check it? If anyone can come ahead and see and they realize, okay, you know what, I think this system looks very similar to it. And if they see, and if you're found out, or your employees can go out and say that, okay, we were using this thing, and that's where the problem starts. But again, if I didn't get your question right, we'll get to it in the end. Now coming back to Fedora project. It's a free and open source operating system, but I consider Fedora to be a much more bigger platform than just operating system. Fedora releases, as I said, operating system every 6 months. A new release comes out of it, and it has the latest and greatest of all the software that you use. If Python 3.9 is coming, Fedora will have it very soon. It's one of the pioneers in taking new technologies and implementing it in their operating system and releasing it, which is followed by the different other great Linux distributions. We call it Linux Mint, Arch, or Ubuntu, different things. Fedora has been known for a very long time to take the latest and greatest and leading as part of the things in from the market. But the bigger aspect of it, as I said, community matters to me. Fedora depends on four things. These are called four pillars of Fedora: freedom, friends, features, first. We always discuss about freedom. If you go on our mailing list, which is all open, you can go back and check all the logs. You would realize that when we ship Fedora, we don't include any single proprietary software by default because we care about freedom of people who are using it. They should be able to go and operate or just check or uh, keep things apart. Anything that comes in the operating system, they should be able to see code of everything. Friends, we very much focus on being friendly to each other, helpful, and adding new features. And these are the things that we focus on first. This is Fedora project, and that's why it matters so much to me. I'll touch some of the areas in our Fedora project where you can help. One is advocates. You can now you use Fedora as your operating system. You have understood the community aspect of Fedora and why it matters, what we do, the ethical aspects of it, and you advocate the same thing in your local community. We call those people as Fedora advocates. Then there is community operations. There is ambassadorship. A community app operation includes developing applications that help community people in their outreach programs, or coming up with ambassadors where you go and you present Fedora in bigger conferences and things like that. Anything that you need to do around community. Then there is design. We very much appreciate design helps. We have Fedora badges where we need design. We have Fedora websites, and we general operating system. You know how much design matters in operating system on how things should be used. You can contribute to GNOME if you want to work on directly the desktop environment that you want to interact with. So design is very big aspect of it. Documentation, again, any project, if it is not well documented, it's going to be very difficult to use, and if people don't use it, it doesn't look a very good have it doesn't look that it will have a bright future in. Other thing is international I18 or localization. You can do translations, making sure that the software is available in your language. uh, there are people who don't know English. There are people who just know, say, Hindi or Telugu. If they have ability to see their operating system or the piece of code in that language, I mean piece of program in that language, it will help them a lot, and it will reach to a wider audience. You can help with that. If you know nothing, if you know two languages, you can help with localization. Again, I'm just saying this, that what are the different areas you can help, not just Fedora project, but any open source projects depending on the project. Then marketing, we have Fedora magazine where we release interesting things, contents for end users or those who are interested in latest technologies, what's happening in Fedora, and just generally good technology as well. So if you want to write a blog post on LaTeX, on how to write your college report in LaTeX, you can write that on Fedora magazine. And all these things also help. You can contribute to those things. Then package maintenance. You know, you like a piece of open source project so much that you'd like to see it in Fedora, and right now it does not exist, right? What you can do, you can take the source, you can build one RPM, you can provide the spec file and SRPM. Don't go into the terminology. Package maintenance is like a bit, it has a learning curve because you are maintaining certain packages, right? You can do that if you are technologically very advanced. Then there is quality assurance. If you don't want to package things, you can go and test things. If you like a tool, you want to make sure that every time it's being released, that all the things that have been implemented in it are working fine. And all these things are very easy to get started with. You'd find tons of mentor that will help you. If no one else, just contact me if you want to work for Fedora project, or like, help Fedora project in being better, and I'll help you with these things. And that's all from my side. Now, what I really want to do is to open the discussion and talk with you all. Feel free to ask any question, feel free to unmute, or if Labyrinth coordinators think that they'll take the question and that will be better, feel free to do that as well. And now we can discuss anything that you have. I'm going through the chat log and I'll see what are the questions. Can you source live example of finding an open source project and contributing to it? Yes, I will. Any social media? Thank you, Prakash. Here on most of the slides, you would see my social media detail. This is the only social network I think I'm active on. I have accounts probably everywhere. I don't have account on Facebook, but again, this is the one that I'm active on mostly. Can you tell me what would be your perception in security of developing open source software? More people will help you finding the bug. If you are, let's say, you missed something when I touched the security part of public code. If you miss something, others can come and say, hey, I think this is a much secure way and this is the problem with your code. Or not just code, documentation. If you are using HTTP website instead of HTTPS or things like that, they can come and help you with these things. And having code open source, you become more secure. Again, repeating Linus law, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, because there will be always so many people to come and help and fix the security before it reaches the bad person. Compared to
Also, yeah,
no,
also to add to that, security in open source, just giving you a recent example. So I work for a cloud robotics company. So recently there was a vulnerability that was discovered in this project called SaltStack. And you wouldn't believe the response time that within a day, the patch for the vulnerability was out for everyone to use. And we also helped them, build this patch. We also helped them in writing this patch. So, that shows you about security of open source, right? Given the timelines with Microsoft security vulnerabilities, generally, if you see that, I'm not just calling out a name, but, generally with proprietary software, as security bugs are, discovered, it can sometimes take months to fix that, right? As long as the company which made that product cannot, can bring out a patch and send it out, till then, you're left out in the open and vulnerable, right? So yeah, security in open source, I would say, generally is much more mature than many proprietary software. So yeah, going back to what Vipul mentioned, right? Linus's quote saying that given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, right? So yeah. A lot of you use HTTPS, right? Most websites, almost all websites that you connect to, you talk to them over HTTPS. So the underlying technology beneath HTTPS is SSL, and most websites, I can easily say 80 to 90% of websites on the internet use implementation of SSL called OpenSSL. and that makes our web secure today, right? So that is about security of open source. Everybody from the Fortune 500 companies to banks to everyone trusts OpenSSL. Yeah.
Right. So, touching on some of the questions, can you tell me what would be your perception? Okay, we've been through that. Okay, live example of finding an open source project. As I said, the first project that you want to contribute, you should probably look at your computer of what you find the best. If you're working on Python, if you're working on Flask, or if you're using a website that helps a lot, and if it happens to be open source, try to find that, because that's the project you are interested in. Randomly finding a project, it may be exciting initially, but after some time you will lose the interest. So the best thing would be to find something that is that suits you. Now, coming back to the question of how can I find a project? Let's say I'm using Ansible, right? I can just go on Ansible. If I happen to use this DevOps tool called Ansible, it's very famous. As you can see, it has 43,000, in fact 44,000 stars, which is used in GitHub. If I want to add a feature to Ansible, I can see all the code that Ansible has, everything, and I can go and add it. You'll see there'll be, if you go in pull requests, these are different people, different contributors who have sent codes to be added in Ansible. You see, okay, just documentation. Someone was not like someone wanted to, someone noticed, okay, this documentation can be improved and there's a better way. They came and added a line to it. It can be as easy as that. You're using something, it happens to be open source, you go and you find how to help that, and again, aligning your personal interest and your experience, and you go and you start with that. So it's very easy to get started with, because you don't always have to start with super high complex things, or you can start with that if you're comfortable enough. So one of the examples, as if I'm interested in Ansible, I would go and look for Ansible. The best thing would be to Google it, right? Ansible, and you'd see Ansible's website. Okay, that was slow. And explore features. Most of the time you'd find that you can go and contribute directly to this thing. You'll find a page, why Ansible, contact us. Here, GitHub. If you go on GitHub, here we are back again. So Google that project, try to see if it is open source or not, try to find where does it lie. This is GitHub, but it's not the only place where you'd find open source project. There's GitLab, there is Bitbucket, there are a bunch of things. This is Pagure. One of my teammates wrote this very nice piece of Gitforge, where Fedora people host their things, and it's amazing. So if you are interested in all the things that Fedora infrastructure, like I contribute a lot to Fedora infrastructure parts. So if you are interested to see how we do all our things, how we maintain our Ansible scripts, and how we run all our infrastructure, you can just go and explore things, search, and you'll find it. If you want to see how Fedora has all the packages, how the spec files are written, you can go on source.fedoraproject.org and you can see everything. If you are interested in adding, let's say, working on this Pagure, in fact, like just like GitHub, but it's open source. You can just go on pagure.io/pagure, and you'd see the code of this thing, and you can that's how you explore it. And I'll touch on GSOC right after it. Prakash wants to add something.
Yeah. Also, Vipul, can you go back to the Ansible repository, GitHub repository, in the
Yeah.
issues section? So one thing that I
In the
wanted
issues,
to
yeah.
touch about is that a lot of open source projects are, they love to, help out newcomers who want to contribute to those projects. They are welcoming. So a lot of them go out of their way and leave a lot of issues, bugs, which are like very easy to fix and would be a good first issue for someone to, come and help out with. So you can go to Ansible's, repository and search by the label good first contribution, easy fix, and those labels, right? So all of these labels filter down these issues, telling you which are the low hanging issues that this project has, right? The low hanging fruits which newcomers can pick up, right? So you can filter by these labels and pick up a issue which is easy enough for your first contribution. And also, no matter how easy anyone thinks it is, you might find it difficult, right? In that case, always be open to hitting someone up and asking them, how do I do this? Hey, I looked at it. I think I'm stuck. This is what I think about this issue, but I don't know what to do. People in open source communities are really, they really love to help. So someone will definitely come forward, help you out and tell you how to do things, right?
Yes,
um, Yes, and
I would
both
like to
me and
show an
Vipul,
example.
yeah, just adding one more thing to that, that
Please, please.
both
Sorry to
me and
interrupt.
Vipul, yeah, both me and Vipul started our open source journey with mentorship, right? That is when someone in an open source project agrees to mentor you and help you out. We knew nothing. We had not contributed to open source before that. We just had one person. We hit him up and we asked him to mentor us, and he helped us, take our first baby steps in open source. So yeah, I think that should help you.
Right. So as Prakash was saying, you go and you see the issues that's open, and you can always see if it is a documentation issue, if it's a design thing that needs help, and you can go ahead and fix that. You can always search different labels. And also, so I found a label called Easy Fix. It was somewhere here. Let's open another tab. And you see all the easy fix issues that people think, okay, it's pretty easy to add. It's a documentation. You have to add an example of return values. If you understand it, if you play around with the project, you can take a week and understand, and then you can start helping there. That will be your contribution. Also, most of the time you would see contributing guidelines on how to start contribution. uh, you'll often find contributing contribution docs, guidelines, everything written down properly. If something is not proper, you can go ahead and fix that in the contribution guideline. That okay, I didn't get it. I think there's a better ways. And apologies, my neighbor's kids are shouting a lot. If you find a way to somehow do something to them legally, let me know. But coming back to the point, you see the contribution guidelines, you see the mailing list links, and how community have to be in contributor license agreement. When you contribute to something, you are agreeing that okay, this code is can be used by anyone, right? So there are a bunch of things that you can see. And if you click on any easy fix issues, you would see someone came and said, I am new to Ansible project and I would like to get started with the issue, can I proceed? You go ahead and someone will reply, yes, thank you for the help, this is where you how you start, these are the links, you can come ahead and ask more questions here. And someone started working on it, right? And then there are similar comments of different things around it. So you'll always find someone who will come ahead. Again, that's where you need to find, you have to evaluate the project, how is the community around it, are people helpful enough to come forward and help you? If they are, then you'll always find a good mentor who will be ready to help you on how these things work. And uh, if I'm not clear, that if you want more examples on how to find project and how to start, and please let me know. Speak up or in the chat. Coming to the next thing, can you put some light around GSOC? Okay, so GSOC is an abbreviation of Google Summer of Code. It's a program by Google where different open source organizations participate and they come up with projects that the projects that the organizations need. Students apply to Google Summer of Code, they explore the project, they see the ideas, and they think, okay, I would like to work on this for 3 months. And you get a pretty decent amount of internship stipend thing to work on. And the similar thing is called outreachy, which is for diversity focus. One of the person from BCA this year is an outreachy intern with Fedora, and I'm very happy. I was very happy to see them when they sent their introduction in mailing list. I welcomed them and I introduced them to some of the mentors, and they are doing great work. And just to shed some of the light on stipend part, they get $6,500 for just 3 months. I'm not sure exactly how much it would convert, but something like 4 lakhs or 4.5 lakhs for 3 months of internship, and it's amazing. And similarly, there is GitHub, GSOC, Google Summer of Code. It follows parity index, so it would be a slightly less than outreach stipend, but even it pays you a lot for 3 months of internship. And the best part, you get to work in a community. You get to work with mentors who are ready to guide you, who will get on call with you and will help you. Okay, you are doing this wrong, let's do it this way. If you are confused about something, you can always reach out to the community. And you'll work on a real life world project, which everyone will be using it once you are done with it, most of the time. So that's Google Summer of Code. And then there is outreach, and there are tons of outreach programs which I definitely recommend you all to go and explore. I run mentored project. All of collection of these things is called mentored project, and I run these things in Fedora project. If you have any doubt, feel free to hit me up. You have my, if you go on vipul.dev/contact, I'll just drop it in the chat. Is the right place to type? Yeah, I'm also reading at the same time. Aditya, okay. So certain things, you are looking at one thing. I gave example of, I gave example of Apache. Do you think any web server is used more than Apache in operating? Again, just to, sorry, I must read this thing so that more people can understand what the question is. Aditya says that open source sometimes is not as popular as proprietary softwares, which is fair, but it's sometimes. Most of the time, you would see the bigger things that is used happen to be open source. It's the different places. Things like animation, things like 3D designing is a very niche area where a big company can invest a lot of money to get a lot of money in return. And those areas might not see the same amount of interest from community who will help in developing it, because they don't have a lot of people working on these things. Even now, Blender is preferred by a lot of people. I know it may not be as popular as Maya, but still it is being used there. And you need to realize that someone was doing it on their free time, and it's now that we are talking about it on a topic that is very niche to very small amount of people who are ready to pay tons and tons of money on these things. So if you are investing a lot of money to make a return of money, that may happen. But if you look at most of the things, uh, VS Code is open source, which is the most famous editor. I use Vim, and I think Vim is the most famous and best editor. It's open source. Apache web server is open source. Flask, most probably, if you build your website, I'm sure you would be using at least one of these. I expect more, but at least one of these to build your website and host it somewhere. So there are places where open source has clearly won and it rules the market. Prakash, go ahead.
Yeah, and also wanted to add to the Blender discussion. I would like to draw an analogy with Windows, right? So Windows seems to be the most widely used operating system. A lot of people, think that Windows is much better than Linux, or it's not user friendly, or there's that there's that mindset that needs to change, right? I've used a lot of Linux based operating systems which have amazing UIs. Sometimes I would say much better than Windows as well, right? But the mindset needs to change. One of the reasons that I can see for this is that as a kid, right, when you grew up in India, the only operating system that you ever were introduced to, or the only operating system that some of us knew till we grew up to, attend college or anything, was Windows, right? We just knew that Windows is the operating system, and we know that the start menu is on the left, and certain things are here, certain things are here. No matter how many Windows versions have changed, some things remain common, right? And also, we always recommend something to someone which we ourselves have tried and tested, right? And Windows is the only thing that we've used for a very long time. So we are always, we find it difficult to adopt change, right? Like, for example, tomorrow you bought a new phone whose UI is much different from or you just put a new launcher on your phone whose UI is much different from what you were used to before, you'll find it very uncomfortable, even if it's, if your friend vouches for it, says that it's the best UI, the best launcher, or anything, you'll find it difficult to get adjusted to it for a few days, right? And that discomfort is there. So getting back to the Blender discussion, a lot of people, when you see that Blender is not as great as probably Maya 3D or anything, it's all about the community behind it and what they want, right? In case you want to make things better, look, Blender is a very complicated piece of software, and it takes a lot of time to build something like that, right? It depends on, if you think you can make something better, you can always go ahead, contribute to it. And at the same time, definitely, probably, Maya 3D will be used for a few more years, as the mainstream, by the mainstream industry. But I would say that, eventually open source will get there. Like back in 1991, when Linux itself was a hobby project of Linus Torvalds, back then Unix was ruling the market, right? AT&T Unix and Windows was ruling the market. Eventually that changed, right? Right now, Linux is everywhere, right? You hold your Android phone in your hand, it runs on Linux. You're interacting with almost any website in this world, you can be 90% sure that it's running on Linux. So that's how far it has come, and it has definitely taken time, right? Good things take time, so it takes a while to get there, and I think Blender is moving towards those stages, right? It takes a lot of time for a project to become mature, to become usable by by anybody, any Tom, Dick, or Harry, right? So
Right.
yeah, that's all that I wanted to add.
In 2001, I I'm not gonna name, or I don't know the exactly. Also, I don't remember the name of the person who said. A spokesperson from Microsoft said, "Open source is an intellectual property destroyer. I can't imagine something that could be worse than this for the software business and intellectual property business." That was 2001. Coming back now, Microsoft officially has written everywhere. Microsoft loves open source. They have 140 working groups. They're dealing with 400 projects at open source. So with time, things change. And hey, I'm talking to you. Maybe that will help. You like Blender, you want to help with it. You'll go ahead and develop something that will make it on top. So that's how we do. We talk about open source, we share things, and we grow.
Also to add there, I remember the person,
It is
and
not
also
Balram.
also Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, then
He said Linux is
just
a
went
cancer,
out.
right?
Yeah, he said Linux is
Yeah.
a cancer, and right now Microsoft itself is a platinum member of Linux Foundation, which means Microsoft invests more than Google into Linux, right? It invests money into Linux. So yeah.
Yeah, uh, and just to let you know, I know the person who is working on Azure, integrating Linux on Azure. He was my former manager who moved to Microsoft now. They are doing great things around Linux, and they clearly appreciate what Linux has done and the way it's growing. So everyone is appreciating it, and like if Microsoft can invest so much, and now they realize that why it's good, then time will come where most of the I Prakash, I guess I was with you in 2000, well, second year of my college. I'll say I don't remember. Time has no concept anymore. When the Oracle vice president was saying that he expects that the term open source software will not be there in 2030 or 2040 because there will be no other way. This will be the default and de facto way of developing open source. I mean, it's just software. It will be open by default. So I'm really looking forward to that day, and I'm helping to reach it there. Any
Yes.
other questions? And now you can also unmute. We are past our allotted time, so now we can be a bit friendly, discussion oriented, and
Yes. And also one of the terms that Vipul mentioned before, right? This is one quote that floats around in the open source communities every day. It says "free" as in free speech, not free peer. So free and open source software does not mean that it does not just mean that it's free to use, or does not always and necessarily mean it's free to use, and you get stuff for free, good stuff for free. So free not as in free beer, but as free speech. So with code, you see code as a way to make a statement, right? You see it as a way to express yourself. You see, the going back to Linus story, he saw Linux, the operating system that he was writing, as a way to express himself, and to make a statement against Unix back at that time, which was a great operating system, but it wasn't free. As a student, I couldn't lay my hands on Unix, right? The licensing cost was enormous. So Linus Torvalds saw it as a way to make a statement that, hey, let's just get together, build this software that today has completely replaced Unix on most systems, right? So yeah, Vipul?
Yes. Did I miss something in chat? If I did, then feel free to repeat it again. I looked at it and I think we covered a lot of things. Oh, wait. Since Linux is an open source, I want to know how much secure is Linux OS compared to Windows and Mac. A lot. Most of the bugs that comes, first of all bugs are public. So even if you see stats, you would see, even being all bugs are public, Linux always ends up being more secure. The number of bugs comes out compared to other operating systems. And the bigger part, that most of the time Windows or Mac, they don't release their bug that it was ever there. They'll just fix it and then just forget about it, and you don't know how many days or years it will take to fix that. So Linux is definitely much more secure, depending on also which version of it you are using, how often you are updating, and which operating system you are using. There are a bunch of things that comes with it.
Vipul, if you scroll down on that, it has his original message. Just Control F 1991. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the original message that Linus Torvalds sent to a hobby group, a mailing list, saying that, hey, hello everyone, I'm doing this hobby project, not anything big, just a hobby. Probably won't end up supporting anything more than the few hard disks that I have, but I'm passionate about it. And also, if you would like to contribute to it, here's the code. Go ahead, contribute to it, right?
Linus
And
Torvald uses Fedora, just to drop it there.
yeah. So after that, Linux has just been a success. After that, the only word for Linux has been success, right?
All right, so I don't see any more questions. Feel free to contact us if you have any doubt, if you want to contribute to some place, if you want to know more about those outreach programs like GSOC Outreach and others, if you want to understand more about Fedora project, or from where you can, wrong browser, just a second. If you want to know how to download Fedora, how to use it, and how you can be helpful to it or any other project, feel free to contact me. There are different variants of Fedora. And yeah, that's all, folks. Thank you
One
very much for joining. If you have questions, feel free to hang around. But if not, then I guess the talk is officially over. I really appreciate you all coming here.
Vipul, also, can you show them what can I do for Fedora.org? That's an amazing resource, right?
Okay. I would like to point out one more thing since Prakash has brought it up. There's this special interest group in Fedora called Fedora Join, and we help newcomers get comfortable with the community and then start contributing. If you are on Telegram, it's Fedora Join, and if you are on IRC, it's Fedora-Join. uh, Let me fetch the link for you all. If you want to start contributing to Fedora, feel free to just reach out to us there, and we'll help you getting started with first getting comfortable with Fedora before starting as a contributor, because we focus more on community than the code. So yeah, and now you can speak up. And for those who have no doubts, bye bye. See you all soon. I'll hang around for a little while just in case someone has any question. And it's Sunday, so I have nothing else in my calendar.
Vipul generally doesn't have anything else.
How dare you?
Thank you so much, Mr. Vipul and Mr. Prakash, for taking out time on a Sunday and helping us conduct the third Tech Talk. It was very nice to know the insights of the industry from you, and thank you so much for dealing with all the questions that we have extended the time limit by so much, which certainly means that it was one of the most successful talks that we have held. So, thank you so much. Once again, everybody who attended the talk, please do not forget to fill the feedback form. And if you wish to get updates about the future events on WhatsApp, please include your contact number as well. Thank you so much for coming.
One thing I would like to point out, not officially part of the talk itself, Durgapur Linux User Group DZ Plug. It has been doing it for 13 years. They organize a free teaching internship, call it whatever, program that starts tomorrow. They introduce you from very basic and they help you contribute to a project of your choice. It's very much open source basis. You don't have like, it's just no money, nothing included. You don't have to reveal your identity. You can be anything and you just learn. They invite different people to give talks and to discuss things. And I'll find some contacts. Or if you can wait for 5-10 minutes, I can also invite the person who organizes DZ Plug to just introduce you all to what it, how you can learn more about it, and how you can start contributing. This is a mentorship thing that they do every year in summer, where they teach you from basics and how to summer training. This is the thing I found it. Uh, so if you want to learn how to do things, they are also a very good place to go and start learning with it. They have everyday call for an hour on IRC text based platform, and they teach you and you do things, you do the homework and you follow back and you learn a lot. I know a lot of people who have done great things coming out from this program. So yeah. And Manshika, I think we can end the call if you are like, if you all are done. And you definitely, you don't, none of you have to hold back and stay if you are not interested in knowing anything more. But if you have any question, you want to speak up. I just want to make sure that once you leave this, you have proper understanding of everything that we spoke on.
You guys can just unmute right now.
Yeah.
You don't have to type the question.
If you have questions, or if you want to ask about me, what I do, how I got started, the conferences I give talk on, or anything, you can do that as well. Because why not? Alrighty then. Bye bye. Let's quit, Prakash. I appreciate it, Aditya. Thank you very much for inviting me. And Manshika, thank you very much for taking this thing over and helping us. And Labyrinth Computer Club, I'm so happy to see you all again. Thank you. I was part of Labyrinth, in case the younger audience
Mm.
don't know that.
Would you please like to share your experience with Labyrinth with us?
How did
Let me
you come
just
up
sum
with
it up.
Labyrinth? Okay, how did you come up with Labyrinth? That's an interesting thing. I didn't come up with Labyrinth, but yeah, definitely we kickstarted it and we started doing things around it. I'll say, and it was never just me. It was me, Prakash. It was definitely. I would like to thank my teachers. They have been super supportive. It was Salima ma'am. It was Smita ma'am. It was Vinay sir, and bunch of different teachers who were always there to help us. No doubt about it. So we were doing internship at Red Hat, and we were learning great deal about open source and new technologies, how to implement these things in real life. And I wanted to share that, especially about Fedora, because I realized ethics matters so much in the Fedora project. So I wanted to organize a talk in Fedora where I would invite my mentor who helps us learn things, just give a talk for an hour or two, like I'm doing right now. That way he could come to the university and do this. It took us around 2 months to get permission and to book everything, to get to just to organize a normal event. And I realized this is not the way to do it. And also at the same time, I was going into different universities giving talk around open source, around Fedora, and I realized they invite me and they invite Prakash, they invite our friends through this called tech club in the university, and we never had those things. So we brought up this idea. We ran for 3 4 months. We ran, cried, bled a lot of these things. We fought
There was a
and
point, yeah, there was a point where, Vipul was like, fuck it. I'm sorry about the language, but yeah, Vipul was just like, no, I'm not doing this. This is just too difficult in Christ, because it was very difficult getting it started. We ran for
yeah,
3 months just for the first talk that we had. And
just for
also,
signature that we could book a room, that kind of thing. So it was difficult. Then what happened? Well, some like teachers started supporting us, and we did our first event. Then we did our second event, and at one point of time, every weekend we were doing an event. It was so easy for us. We had around 25 30 members, if I remember correctly. Someone was in charge of hand, and they were amazing people. My God, without them I can't imagine how things would have worked out. They were ready to just go and book it, and now we had teacher signature, and sometimes even didn't need signature because they started knowing us. Okay, these folks come and book the rooms and book the classes and get. We were able to talk to security guards that please let these people come into universities. We allowed some events open for all. We invited amazing people talking from cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, to I don't know, a lot of different technologies. And we did around 30, 35 workshops. And we did a 3 day Node.js, or it was Node.js, or it was something else,
uh,
workshop.
Angular. It was
Angular.
Angular.
I had a friend who was also a Fedora intern, and he was amazing in Angular. And I spoke to him if he was interested. And 3 days, students were allowed to skip classes. Not the, I guess it was the whole day. Yes, 3 days they were allowed to skip classes and attend the workshop. It was a huge deal. We started doing attendance when we started doing that. Okay, if you attend our event instead of the class, you could give you attendance. Not necessarily it's always beneficial, but most of the time, if you're interested in something and you find that you can learn more compared to the class you are in at that point, you could attend this and we'll give you attendance. So by the end, we realized that it has become a lot better and we could do much more than this. And I'm very proud of how it turned out. Definitely thanks to all the teachers and volunteers that we had. Prakash worked a
Yeah.
lot, Karthik worked a lot, and
Also to add
there
to
was
that,
some.
right? Yeah, the more you work for it, the more credibility you get, right? So
Yeah.
that credibility helps. Like there were instances where we needed to get things done. We just had to walk up to the teachers and ask them that hey, this is something I have to do for the club. So can I just leave the class? And that attendance used to be taken care of, because they knew that if we are stepping out of the class, we are gonna be doing something for the club, right? And something for the department. In the end, it shows good on the department's names, right? So yeah.
And starting from small events, we ended up doing big, huge conferences like DevConf India, where like 2,000 people attended in when we started. So it opened a door to industry where we could do much more than just. I mean, you're learning from the syllabus, and I think I liked it. And I was
Not to
like, look,
mention,
I'm back giving talk through Labyrinth.
yeah, and also to mention, we enjoyed it a lot, right? We
Yeah,
had
definitely.
a set of people, set of people. We worked together closely, and we learned a lot of things through that, right? A lot of organizational skills and stuff that you wouldn't learn in a classroom. You'd learn by being part of something like this, right? So we
Yeah,
want,
I remember
yeah.
Prakash and I, we used to miss classes a lot of the time and go attend different meetups where we made networks. And like, because we knew those people, we could invite them back to university to give talk. So definitely, I'll definitely recommend some of these things. Well, now everything is online, which is much better, I guess, in some reason. But
Also,
definitely do these things, talk to people and invite them to give talk back to Christ. Prakash,
yeah,
please.
and also since you guys are just going to start your careers and everything, right? I would like to say that Bangalore has an amazing meetup culture. Anything that you're interested in, be it designing, Python, Fedora, or just about anything that you're interested in, it has, just go up to meetup.com and find a group that you're interested. Even if it's cycling, right? You would find meetup groups that just get together and, they just get together and do cycling. They just get together and talk about something that they're passionate about, poetry, be it music, anything. So just go up to meetup.com, make use of these resources. The more people that you meet, the more networks that the more you build your network, right? Like right now, it's just so easy for us to get a job, even if we wanted to change jobs or anything, right? It's just so easy because there are so many mails and so many things lying around in our inbox saying that, hey, I met you here and here. So this is the company that I work for. I either work for Microsoft, I work for this company, I work for that company. And we had a role open and I really like talking to you. Would you like to join us? So that kind of mails become really common if your network is good, right? So definitely go out to events, even if it is a virtual event, given the current circumstances, go out, meet similar, like-minded people, build your network. Networks help a lot. Even if you had to, tomorrow you got an offer from Microsoft, even if, a person from Microsoft, even to get that referral, right? Network matters a lot and referrals work
Yeah.
a lot, right?
I would recommend two things. Open Source Summit North America is happening from tomorrow. I'm not sure if it still you can get tickets or not, but I'm attending it. And if you're attending, it's a great place to go say hi. Dizzy Plug is also a very nice thing to learn from your peers who are learning along with you and the uh, teachers or senpais or whatever you want to call them. They'll help you learn stuff. So that's also a very nice place to meet new people. And yeah, that's the one of the Prakash is funny. I'm very surprised that the logo still lasted. I made that logo in PowerPoint slides.
Oh, yeah, I wanted
Labyrinth
to point
logo.
that out. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I loved it when I made it, and I didn't
I
exactly
still don't
expect to last.
remember what was the logic behind this logo though. I, I
Hold
remember you
on,
explaining it to me and me zoning out. But, yeah,
I had some logic. People liked it, and it stuck. So hey, that's what matters.
it
Yeah.
doesn't
Anyone has
look like a
anything else?
labyrinth.
Hey, we are
But
breaking the labyrinth.
yeah, but much better than the previous logo. Has anyone seen our previous logo?
Oh my God. Okay, another thing. I was not big fan of the name Labyrinth, but there was this computer club Labyrinth that someone else has started and they did a gaming event and that's it. It never did anything. It was just stale for years. And we went to like, hey, we want to form this technology tech club, and they said "Well, it already exists." And I said, I am in university for a year and a half. It exists where? But we couldn't change the name, so that's how the Labyrinth name. We were planning of the Root Club or what was it,
Something
Prakash? We were
cooler.
planning a bunch of geeky things, names.
Yeah, I think I still have that picture somewhere. We'd written it out on a piece of paper.
Yeah, we had a bunch of things what we would like to name it and how it. Definitely, our idea was to have it evolve a lot around open source technologies and how people can grow. So related to that.
So I think that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I think we can stay around till 6:40, right? Since everybody else, 4 more minutes.
Yeah. Folks, if you are being uh, nice that first I should leave, then you leave. Trust me, we are not exactly jobless, but jobless. So feel free to stop. I mean, quit if you are done, and Prakash and I can just continue discussing what we do. Someone said design. I remember Prakash bought this new gaming laptop and he brought and it had Windows. It was very difficult for me to do anything in that because I didn't understand how anything works. So UI is very subjective and design is very much like what you are comfortable with. I'm much comfortable with what I use, and I use i3 WM, which is just keyboard. Like you rarely use mouse, and everything is from the configuration. And I'm much more comfortable in that. So once you have the ability to tweak everything on how you like it, it becomes much better than your general provided by default things. I also use GNOME, which I'm using right now. It looks amazing. In my opinion, much better than Windows because I couldn't figure out how that works. And I used Windows was like probably 5 years ago or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and that was the most clueless that I've seen. Ripple, all for just playing GTA 5 on it.
Yeah, so when Prakash brought his laptop and I was like, oh, GTA 5, I have heard that game. I would like to play. And I'm looking at everything like, okay, how does this work? What is this? So yeah, definitely.
Is there? Do you have any questions, guys? You can just unmute. Right now, I think since given the amount of people, everybody can unmute. Or we'll stay around till 6:40 and yeah.
Just 2 more minutes. I think we have overstayed our welcome, Prakash.
Hello.
Hey,
Yeah,
hi.
it's even better, right? If the participants are Labyrinth members, how does it matter? Like, feel free to speak up, ask anything.
Because of the Linux user base, like it's very low compared to the Windows and Mac operating systems. Companies are not willing to make their softwares for Linux. So all these creative applications, the Adobe Suite and other stuff, so they're not willing to come up to Linux. And like I like using Linux most of the time. I'm on my Linux system only. But then if I have to edit a video, then I have to switch back to Windows, use the Premiere Pro software again, then come back to Linux for any other thing. That's really like disturbing. Like,
Yeah. So the idea is not that there are not enough Linux users. The idea is that they would like to make money and they like to keep their code proprietary. They don't like to make it open source for like everyone can benefit from it. There's a money aspect and business aspect behind it. But certainly there's a point that since Linux does not exactly is made with certain architectures in mind and it's widely used everywhere. I have seen people running Linux in watches, phones, and whatnot, anything. In fact, like we all know that our toasters and our refrigerator run on Linux. So one of the problems is that since it depends on so many architecture, making it stable is definitely a bit of challenge. But more than that, it's the business aspect that they don't want to make the code open source. So if and like Fedora doesn't ship with anything that's not open source. So you'll never see Adobe some software which is not open source on Fedora. There are virtualization methods. There's thing called Wine, which you use to run Windows software on Linux. So certainly there are ways you can do that, but I guess they hamper on your performance. Uh, but I see your point. Yeah,
so is it like either the company has to become open source or
your companies are not open source, right? Your programs and codes are open source. Like Red
yep.
Hat is a company. Itself is not open source, but all most of the things that Red Hat does, it has upstream that's open source.
Yeah,
So
and
like
also to add to that, right? So any open source project is only as good as the people behind it, right? So there are some people flogging, like, they are giving up on their weekends and, building some amazing projects like Blender and everything. But just like anything that you build, right? A building or a sculpture or anything, it totally depends on how many people are working on it, how much man hours it translates to man hours, and it translates to work, right, in the end, right? So as long as the communities around them are working, I think there will be a point in the future where open source communities behind these projects will make this project mature enough. They are still usable, just not mature enough, I would use that term. So yeah,
Tacton,
it
you said?
totally depends on the community behind it. Huh?
Did you say Tacton? Did you say Tacton?
No,
Okay,
I
I thought I
mentioned
heard
that.
like you used Tacton. Okay.
Yeah, it's about maturity, right? So back 10 years, just rewind 10 years and or 10-15 years, Linux on desktop wasn't as mature as it is today, right? So that's why not a lot of people. There was only a very tiny segment of people who were using it on their desktops or on their laptops, right? But today Linux is much more mature and much more usable, and I have seen, I helped a few of my friends install Linux because they were tired of, Windows, or they just wanted to learn, right? And I have seen them not go back to Windows since then. I haven't, apart from the recent laptop that I bought, the gaming laptop which has Windows. Apart from that, I don't remember using Windows any other
Disappointed
time,
noises in
right?
background.
So that mostly means that those creative programs mostly won't be coming to Linux, right?
It's a subjective question. Totally depends on the community behind it. If you think you can help improve something, definitely go ahead, contribute. So it's about how many drops, right?
I prefer GIMP and Inkspace over Photoshop and what was it called?
Illustrator.
Illustrator, yeah. Definitely they look nicer, but the amount of freedom and the amount of customizability I have in GIMP is much better.
You can
But again,
customize
it's
GIMP
subjective.
itself, right?
Yeah.
The amount of
You can go
customization.
back in the code and change things. Imagine that. Not just the bars. But yeah, it's very much subjective and what you are comfortable with. Once you get comfortable with GIMP, you'll be using that for everything.
Yep, yep.
And
But I
also,
do acknowledge the gap in some of the creative tools like Adobe things and video editing stuff. There's definitely it exists.
most of these things also exist because the parent company behind these tools pump a lot of money into it, right? Which open source software, especially communities behind Blender, GIMP, and all of these, do not work with a lot of resources at hand, right? They do it on their free time. A lot of contributors just contribute to it on their free time, and Adobe has or companies like Adobe and everyone, they have a lot of money to pump into these projects, and they hire the best developers, they put them on this project, and they pump whatever money is necessary to make
Yes.
things happen, right?
And when companies start utilizing Linux or something, it also very much becomes what they are targeting to do. Like you heard SpaceX used Linux. CERN uses CentOS a lot. So they would like to work on what they are utilizing. Most of these creative things come from personal projects on weekend interest kind of things, not companies. A company would not want to, okay, I'm interested in video development and let's start a thing. They would like to release something and that would need, and that's why they become back to contribute. So when the big companies and big giants like let's say Microsoft, they are contributing to Linux, there's a reason behind it, because they would like to utilize certain aspect of it. So the target audience changes from a general consumer to what industry needs, stability, some software and like a platform, those things. Now you can't expect SpaceX to spend on Blender. They'll spend on some maybe 3D modeling to see the or simulation programs that is open source. In neurology, there are lots and lots of most of the programs are open source. I have a friend. So there's a thing called Fedora. I have a friend who is doing PhD in neurology in UK, and he started this thing called Fedora, where they package and they develop tools on Fedora for neuroscience. So if you have target audience and if you have skills, then you can do it, but most of the time companies would only invest in what they can utilize back. That's also one of the reason for these gaps.
Yes, yes, I get it.
That's all, folks. Thank you very much. I think I should go now.
Yeah. See you.
Thank you so much for accepting and joining us. Really
Yeah, of
appreciate it.
course. Yeah, it's just I was waiting for this Sunday 5 p.m. My weekdays are really, really, really filled nowadays with a lot of work. But yeah, thanks a lot. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye
See
bye.
you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Prakash, also
Yeah.
for joining.
Yeah. See you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.